Welcome to Art with World. I am your host WAHEED, and we have a very esteemed guest with us today, Irfan Javed Sahab. Welcome Irfan Sahab for coming to this.
Thank you for inviting me, Arshad.
Irfan Javed is a personality sketch writer, short story writer and an essayist. His book Ajaib Khana was awarded Best Urdu Prose by Oxford University Press in 2021, and the same book was awarded as Best Prose of the Year and Saadat Hasan Manto Award by Pakistan Academy of Letters as well. Welcome Irfan Sahab.
Thank you.
There are a lot of things to talk with you. You are a short story writer, you are a personality sketch writer, you are an essayist. But I think I would start with your sketches because I find them very interesting. Not only interesting, but they always give ambience of the times we live in, and those characters, those personalities lived in those times. It's not just biography of a personality, but you catch everything, environment, culture, values, and so many other literary aspects of those personalities. I was fascinated by sketches of Maulana Muhammad Hussain Azad. I had a personal liking for Saadat Hasan Manto's sketches as well, sketches of Ahmed Bashir as well. But I find your sketches very intriguing, and those are very interesting for me as well and for our viewers as well. So I would start from that. How did you come to this personality sketch writing?
First of all, thank you, Arshad, for inviting me to this program. Basically, I used to visit Ahmed Adeem Kasmi Sahab's Fanoon office and interact with a lot of literati over there.
Okay.
A lot of poets, writers, they used to come. And it was after the death of Kasmi Sahab that I realized that if I don't write the sketches of those people whom I used to meet over there, and later on I developed friendship, or you can say an intimate relation with a lot of writers due to that by interaction with Ahmed Adeem Kasmi Sahab. So in order to record and to I had a idea, I had a feeling that if I don't record those memories in the form of sketches, they will with the passage of time they will vanish. And in order to keep them in my writings, and so I brought them in my writings, and later on they evolved in the form of various sketches.
Okay, very interesting. So you were kind of recording history.
Yes, I was recording history.
Well, you have just mentioned Ahmed Adeem Kasmi Sahab, and it reminds me a couple of instances. I had an interaction with him. Well, it was not as close as you had. I happened to visit his office, which was in Anarkali in those times. Fanoon's old office was perhaps in Anarkali, Lahore. I went there with my elder brother. I met him. But that was that. I had not an opportunity to meet him again. But you had written a very detailed account of his life, his office, his working style, many things. He came up in conversation with you. So could you just share with us your interaction with Ahmed Adeem Kasmi Sahab, because it would be good for our viewers as well, that he would know about that personality who was a great short story writer, columnist, poet, and of course, above all, editor of Fanoon, who was once standard for art and literature in Pakistan. And many people, they would feel honored if they were published in Fanoon. So could you just share some details of your interaction with him?
Yes, Arshad, I think Ahmed Adeem Kasmi was a great man. He was a very good short story writer, a good poet, and a very good editor. But above all, he was a great human being.
Yeah.
That's why my second book of profile sketches of named Surkhab, I have dedicated it to Ahmed Adeem Kasmi Sahab. And he had a very lasting impact on my literary mindset. because I first met him when I was a student. I went to his office and he gave me the respect which is accorded to an established writer, whereas I was a novice at that time. And later on he encouraged me. He was a proper editor in the existing Urdu literature or literary magazines. One very important element is missing, and that element is that of a role of an editor. An editor is more of a compiler these days. He used to edit and he used to guide with a certain degree of humility, even to a novice like me, that how to proceed in my fiction writing and how to write various essays or sketches and other things. So I think he was more of a mentor and a teacher to me than a simple editor.
This is interesting. It reminds me of another thing which is not very happy event to remember, I guess. It was earlier Faz festivals, Faz Peace festivals, after death of Faz Ahmad Faz. It was perhaps 86 or 7, some year like that, and I was there. And during various other activities of Faz Peace Festival, there was a mushaira as well. And all great poets of Pakistan, and even from across the border, they had come, they were there. I mean, Kafi Azmi was there, Majroo Sultan Puri was there, Ali Sardar Jafri was there, and all others. When Ahmad Naeem Kasmi Sahab came to the stage, there was a protest from the youngsters, and they forced him to leave the stage. It was a very unhappy moment. That also tells once he was Secretary General of Anjuman Taraqib and Musannifin, and later on he had his own path, but people did not accept that. Did this event ever surface in your conversation with Kasmi Sahab?
No, this specific incident did not surface in any of my conversations with Kasmi Sahab. However, I have mentioned in his sketch regarding his relationship with Faz Ahmad Faz, because there was a time when there was a misperception that there existed some sort of contemporary rivalry between both the poets and both the writers. But Ahmad Naeem Kasmi Sahab was all praise for Faz Sahab, and I have mentioned that many a times he recited many verses of Faz Sahab in front of me and praising his poetry.
Oh, great. And I mean, your book Darwaze is full of very interesting literary personalities of Pakistan. In fact, this book is kind of history of literary journey in Pakistan. I would also now discuss another great personality of Urdu literature, that is Abdullah Hussain. I am personally very fond of him. I had read his Udas Nasle, which he later translated as himself as Weary Generations in a very young age, and I still have its impact on me. Before discussing anything about his work, I would like to hear from you about his personality, something interesting which our viewers which would also like to know about him.
Yes, definitely. Thank you for asking this question. A few months before his death, he shared with me a very spiritual experience. He had a dream in which he saw his mother, who had come to take him to the heavens in the form of a seagull. And there were 2 more seagulls over there. And it is imperative to point out, it is very pertinent to point out that Abdullah Hussain was born when his father was 54 years old. And his mother died at a very young age. She was the 3rd or 4th wife of his father. And Abdullah Hussain was the youngest son. So he had a very strong bonding with his father. And because it was during his very early age that his mother died, so they did not have a very strong bonding of that sort, which he later developed with his father. But in the dream, he saw his mother coming to receive him, and he told me, and I have narrated in his sketch, that he told me that I saw this dream and I think it is time for me to bid farewell to this world. And there were few other certain things. He was a very tall man,
Yeah.
not in terms of physical height. He was 6'4" or 6'3",
Yeah.
but he was a tall man in the sense that I have seen him to be a very brave man. He would always challenge the existing narrative which was popular with the masses, and he was ready to not only challenge them, challenge the narrative, but he was also ready to justify his stand with proper logic and with proper reason. So I think he was, and thirdly, he lived in England for nearly 5 decades. So he was an amalgam, he had a personality which was an amalgamation of Eastern values as well as the Western emancipation. So it was embodied in a person. And I also, you mentioned Udas Nasle, the very generations. He was 32 years old when he wrote that book. And he was working at a factory in Daud Khel at that time. He was a chemical engineer. And he had nothing to do. So to while away the time, he started writing that novel, and he did not know that he had that specific element of genius of a great writer in him. So when he completed that novel, he went to Salimur Rahman Sahab and few other famous editors of those time. And Salim and Saab and another very towering person was the editor of Savera. And I think it was Salahuddin Ahmad. And he showed his draft to them. And after reading the draft, they were very impressed. And they told him that instead of bringing that novel, he should write a few short stories so that those short stories become a source of introduction for him in the literary world. So he wrote a few short stories, which later came in the form of an anthology titled Nasheb.
Yeah, I have read that.
And he wrote extraordinary short stories. And those short stories were also based, a few of them were based on his experience in Canada, because he went to Canada on a scholarship for a year, I think. And when he later returned, he transformed that experiences into short stories as well.
Well, I think I remember that short story which was in Canadian background. It's Nadi.
Is Nadi.
And there was a very famous character, Blanca.
Yes.
It's a girl. I
Yes.
still remember. It's
Yes.
very fascinating story.
Yes.
There is also very famous controversy in Urdu literature, and there's a lot of debate. I mean, Quratul Haider said that he had tried to copy her style, which he had used in Aag Ka Darya, River of Fire, what we say. Did it ever come into your discussion with him?
Yes, it did come. Basically, Abdullah Hussain, when he started writing that novel, he wasn't even sure that that novel will be published in the book form. It was just an experiment. And by that time, he was an avid reader of world literature.
Yeah.
And he used to, and he said to me that I had read Quratul Haider, and he was very impressed by her style of writing and by her thoughts and the depth of her observation and her thinking. So maybe it had influenced him subconsciously. And when you read something and you write your first piece of fiction, it at times reflects in some form of your writing. So he always kept her in high esteem, but he never admitted, or he never said that he had copied her, though there were influences of Quratul Haider on his writing. Secondly, if you as you told me that you have read that novel.
Oh yes, many
Quratul
times.
Haider and Abdullah Hussain were diagonally opposite in their diction,
Of course.
in their treatment of subjects.
Yeah.
So that subconscious influence reflected in some form in his writing. We cannot say that it was a total or a reflection in toto. It was a reflection in segments. in the subconscious, and that reflection appears in the undercurrent of his writing that novel.
Yeah, it's understandable. I have read both the novels. I didn't find that he had ever tried to copy her style.
Yes,
Yeah.
he never did.
And moreover, he also said at one place that if I could write hundreds of pages with my own style, why should I write just 2 pages in someone else's style? It may be a tribute to another writer, but it doesn't mean that he cannot write in those things. By the way, what do you like best in Abdullah Hussein's work?
His short stories,
Oh, yeah.
Nasheb, which was published by the title of Nadi in India, and after that,
Nadi is another short story.
I know,
Yeah.
but the title of the book was Nadi in India.
Okay.
In Pakistan, it was titled Nasheb.
Nasheb,
It
okay.
had a few short stories. So I like his first book of short stories even more than his novel.
Okay.
And in Udas Nasle, you can see that in Qurratul Ain Haidar's writings there is a certain element or reflection of elitism, whereas Abdullah Hussain wrote about the rural Punjab,
Yeah.
and he did not romanticize it. Romancing with the nature was a prevalent practice, as was done by Ahmad Adim Kasmi Sahab. He used to romanticize the Punjabi rural culture, or even you can see
Kapaas Ka Phool,
Kapaas Ka Phool, yes, and a lot of his other short stories and anthologies. But Abdullah Hussain was very direct, and he was very original and natural in his depiction of the rural life in rural Punjab.
Well, you had just talked about romancing with nature, and you had referred to Kasmi Sahab, which is, of course, he did that. But I think there is another person in your sketches who just romanced with nature, and that was excellent, and that is A. Hamid.
Yes.
I mean, his stories just take you to some other world. Not only to other world, you start thinking differently. Very idyllic and very romantic, in fact. Well, now this is time we can discuss him as well with you.
A. Hamid belonged to Amritsar,
Yeah.
and my family also migrated from Amritsar,
Okay.
my paternal family. So my grandfather, he used to read his regular column, a series of columns which appeared in Nawai Waqt at that time, by the title of Barish Khushbu or Samavar.
Yeah, Samavar.
Barish Khushbu Samavar. And at times, when I was a small child, I was a kid, my grandfather, who himself was a teacher, and he had a great authority in Persian as well as in Urdu, and interestingly, he was a teacher of mathematics. So he used to read aloud those columns by A. Hamid. And he would identify with those columns because he also belonged to Amritsar. And so from the very beginning, I used to hear the name of A. Hamid. Later on, when I started reading the newspapers, and it started from Nawai Waqt, the most interesting column I used to find was Barish Khushbu Samavar. And there was a romance. Even I remember that my grandfather, when the weather was very romantic, or it was a very pleasant weather, my grandfather would say that though the weather of Lahore is very good, but what to talk about Amritsar? Amritsar, he used to mention Amritsar as if it was some paradise on this earth. And same held true for A. Hamid. So you can say I had an emotional bond. My father was born in Amritsar. So whole of my family, when they used to identify with Amritsar and all those things, the company bagh, and those gardens and freshwater wells. So I developed a bond with A. Hamid subconsciously. And later on, when I actually went to him, to his house in Zamnabad, and started meeting him as a student meets his teacher, or as a you can say, it would be too much to say that as a disciple meets his spiritual guru or something like that. But I was fascinated, and I am still, because he was a very soft person. There was no controversy, no element. Let me narrate a very interesting incident to you. That Qudratullah Shahab, he offered A. Hamid that I will give you in those times the government would give permits, and writer could go and he could sell those permits and earn a.
He perhaps gave it to Manto Sahab as well.
No, yes, he also gave to Manto Sahab. And
I tried to give, I don't know.
no, he gave to Manto Sahab.
Manto Sahab.
Manto Sahab thought, and then he returned those permits. And it was a greatness of Shahab Sahab that he did not expect any favor from Manto or from A. Hamid. He gave them as a contemporary writer in those times. So he gave A. Hamid offered A. Hamid a few of those permits, but A. Hamid refused. Because he
it's
was
greatness of Hamid Sahab.
Yes,
Hamid Sahab.
because A. Hamid was not a materialistic man. He was not a man of this world. And I have written in this book that if reincarnation exists, then I expect that A. Hamid would be born again in paradise in the form of a flower.
You have talked about discussing nature, or I mean portraying nature in short stories, and I think at that time it was also possible because we all in general and writers in particular had some exposure to nature. I mean, we could see flowers, gardens, villages, streams, rivers. Now rivers are being dried up, our spaces, our urban spaces are shrinking. Where there were flowers or gardens, people are constructing buildings, and cement is everywhere. In those times I could remember Shafiqur Rahman, in his writings I could see a lot of romance with nature. Even Krishan Chandra, he could do that. These days we don't have, perhaps because those have disappeared from our landscape, isn't it?
Yes, this is very unfortunate and very sad. My father was a government servant, and during my childhood we used to live in big houses in canal colonies, government accommodations, which at times spanned acres of lands. And we lived in Sahiwal, in Bahawalpur, in Multan, in Attak, in Sargodha, and many other cities. And over there were large houses and large vacant tracts of land with gardens in them, with fields in them, and with streams going between various different houses. So I developed a very strong bond with the nature, because there were a lot of trees, and I lived in, and when we moved to Lahore, Kent, I was born in Lahore cantonment area, and it was a very green area, a very serene area. I remember I used to see a lot of birds which I don't see anymore. I used to see many animals which I don't see anymore. And this is so saddening, for the fact that we inherited this earth from the nature as a part of the living beings. Animals were here before us. They are the real owners and inheritors of this earth, and we unfortunately
push them away,
and we simply got hold of whatever we could. We killed them. We killed the innocent animals. We took over the possession of the land which was meant for the animals, for their natural habitat. And human has been the cruelest animal in the world. This is so unfortunate.
Irfan, we have talked very interesting things about short story writers, but I should not forget that you yourself are a very good short story writer. I have read your short stories, and those are just amazing. What I found very striking in your short stories is that your style, it's simple, and you don't try to create suspense or things like that. It's very flow. It's very smooth, very smooth flow in your stories. But at the same time, simplicity does not mean that those do not take you to a world which gives us a lot of discoveries about human beings, their inner feelings, their contradictions, their frustrations. Did it come naturally to you, or you just adopted this style in a way, or there were certain influences on you?
There are basically two phases in my short story writing.
Okay.
My first book of short stories, the only book till now, is titled Coffee House.
Coffee House, yeah.
I started writing short stories for Fanoon. I also wrote for Sierra Digest. And Sierra Digest was a very prestigious digest at some time. Even its circulation exceeded more than 100,000 copies at one time. And Mustansar Hussain Tarar was introduced by in his initial days by Sierra, and Maulana Abul Ala Maududi used to write for Sierra Digest, and a lot of other people. So initially I was impressed by the style of you can say Manto Saab, and I was more attracted and fascinated in my teenage and in my later years, not by the technique, or you can say you can say certain things in a very subtle way. But Manto Saab wasn't except for few of his short stories like Boo, like few of other Babu Gopinath, in which he expressed his thoughts in a very subtle way.
Yeah,
but there were other short stories like Khollo.
Loud, very loud, yeah.
Yeah, they were very loud. So initially my first phase had more of an impact of Manto Saab, and I tried to be a bit loud. But later on, in the last 10 years, rather 12 years, I have hardly written 12 or 13 short stories, because I have focused more on sketch writing and more on these thought-provoking essays, philosophical essays. And these days I have shifted from that technique to a more subtle and a more all-encompassing sort of technique of short story writing.
Very well, we'll come to that. But you have just mentioned Sierra Digest, and that reminds me of another digest which had just made history in Pakistan's Urdu readership, and that is Sabrang Digest. And Shakil Adilzada used to publish that digest, and he himself used to write in that. I remember in my childhood we would read Inca and many other stories like that. And in addition to those, are very interesting. And in addition to that, there was a very good collection of world literature, short stories. He used to translate or get it translated and get it published in his digest. And you have also interacted with him, and you have written a very, very good, very interesting sketch about him as well in your book, Darwaze. So I would like to hear from you what you have written, or something more which you want to share with us and our viewers.
Thank you. Basically, Shakil Adilzada is a larger than life person. I have interacted extensively with him for the last 20 years. I consider him as my spiritual guide and my mentor. That is why I dedicated my second book, Surkhab, to two of my mentors. The first one was Ahmadim Kasmi, and the second one is Shakil Adilzada. Even today, I talk to him daily. Even I talked to him yesterday, and when I am in Karachi, and I have been living in Karachi for the last 17 years. So we meet every week, you can say. So he has been very kind to me. And the greatest accomplishment of Shakil Adilzada Sahab is that he introduced the best global literature to the students of Urdu, to the readers of Urdu. And he incorporated quality literature into popular magazines. Secondly, one of his serials, Bazigar, became fabulously popular in Pakistan. I did some research on Sabrang, and I have also mentioned that in his sketch, that there was a time when every 1 in 10th household in Pakistan used to read that digest.
Yeah, including myself.
Yes. And it would take a lot of time to compile that digest and to write his piece of writing and include it in the digest. And at times it would take a year for the next edition of the digest to come, for the next volume to come. And at times it would also take three years.
Yeah.
So, and a very interesting thing, that Shakil Saab was a very close family friend of Rais Saab and John Saab.
Rais Amrovi and John Elia.
Rais Amrovi and John Elia.
Yeah.
John Elia came to Pakistan in 1958. And Shakil Adilzada also came in 1958. They stayed in the same house for many years. And just imagine that imagine a house in which Rais Amrovi, John Elia, Sayyid Muhammad Taqi, Shakil Adilzada, they all living in the same household. So he had a great impact of those literati and those literary intellectuals of those times on him. So, and let me tell you one very interesting fact about Shakil Saab, that he did his matriculation in Hindi. He learnt Urdu later.
Okay.
And now he's a master of Urdu.
Yeah.
You cannot see anyone writing better Urdu than him.
Yeah.
He is a stylist in Urdu.
Yeah. That's true.
So, rather it also reminds me of a writer, Vladimir Nabokov,
yeah.
who was a Russian,
Yeah.
but he developed such a mastery in English
Yeah.
that he became a stylist in English literature.
Yeah.
And he became a giant in English literature.
Yeah. Lolita is famous.
Lolita
for-
and a lot of other.
Yeah. Yeah.
You must read his memoir.
Yeah.
It is one of the best memoirs I've read in my life.
Okay.
And so same holds true for Shakil Adilzada, who wasn't brought up in Urdu, and his father, Shakil Saab, he used to publish a magazine from Muradabad, and Rais Saab used to work for his father. He used to write for his father, not work, but write for his father. So that bond goes back to their earlier generations.
Okay.
So that influence also crept into his writings and in his editorship as editor of that famous magazine.
Okay. Well, that's very interesting, and I am just reminded of many more things which are related to these digests and other things. But this is just a time for a short break. Viewers, stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Irfan, we are having a very interesting discussion. In fact, your references to Sabrang Digest and that a lot of best literature of the world used to get published there, it had made me a bit nostalgic. I remember my childhood when even not only Digest, but Sayyid Qasim Mahmood, who introduced a Shahkar series, and we used to get very, very world-class novels, collection of short stories in a very low price, 2 rupees perhaps, something like that. But we can't carry on. We are short of time and we have to cover so many topics before that. And since I had just said these sketches are making me nostalgic, you have also written about Ahmed Bashir Saab. I don't have privilege to have so much interaction with him, but I used to visit his home, where he used to play chess with Safdar Mir Saab, who used to write columns with name of Zeno, I guess. He was a great intellectual. Maybe we can listen from you about Ahmed Bashir Saab as well. He himself is a great sketch writer, in fact.
Ahmed Bashir Saab was a very vocal and a very brave man.
Yeah. I know that.
And he was a very good sketch writer.
Yeah,
And at times it saddens me
yeah,
that there are certain novels in Urdu literature which have not been given their due importance,
yeah.
which includes one of the novel written by Ahmed Bashir titled
जो मिले थे रास्ते में.
Dil Bhatkega.
दिल भटकेगा. Yeah, sorry.
जो मिले थे रास्ते में
It is
is a book
collection of
sketches.
sketches.
Yes,
yeah,
sketches.
Yeah, yeah.
So at times people ask me, a few of my friends, they have also asked me that why do I write sketches? And I tell them that all the great writers of the past, they were not only short story and novel writers, they were also sketch writers.
Okay.
As you mentioned, Manto Saab,
Yeah, yeah.
Ahmed Bashir, A. Hamid, Javed Siddiqui. These days, Asghar Nadeem Sayyed Saab is writing a very good sketches. Javed Siddiqui is one of my favorite sketch writers.
Okay.
So Ahmed Bashir, he gained fame due to his sketches, owing to his sketches. But later on, his autobiographical novel was published, and it is a wonderful read.
Yeah.
It is one of those novels, just like Daira by Asim Bhatt, Muhammad Asim Bhatt. It's a great novel. And another is by Ashraf Shad, Bewatan. So these 2-3 novels, I believe they deserve more acclaim and more mention in the literary circles. So Ahmed Bashir Sahab was a very good writer. He was a very brave man. He was very eloquent. He did not budge in front of any pressure by any quarter, and he had a clarity of mind throughout his life.
Yeah, great. You have talked about Dil Bhatkega. I have read that. It's kind of his own biography, I guess. While we are talking of novels, how could we ignore Mustansar Sen Tharar? You have written his sketch as well, and he has given to Urdu literature so many novels, and it's still writing. And you have a very detailed account of his life, his working style, and so many other things. Before we move to some other topic, maybe we could hear from you something more about Tarar Sahab as well.
When we mentioned A. Hamid,
Yeah,
that he was a romantic.
yeah,
Ahmed Nadeem Kasmi Sahab romanticized rural Punjab. So Mustansar Hussain Tarar Sahab is also a big romantic. He has romanticized nature. He has introduced many parts of the world and many parts of this country, our country, to the readers. And there is a certain depth. I believe that he is the most important writer, living writer of Urdu in the world right now. His novels are, some of his novels are amazing. My favorite is Raak, and then his Bahau. And one of his novels which is not mentioned much is Dakiya or Julaha. And obviously a few of other his novels are, he has written a short story book a few years ago, 15 Kahaniyan. And the first story I still remember, I remember all the stories. एक स्नो टाइगर की सरगुज़िश्त and others, but पहाड़ों वाली फूलों वाली पहाड़ी, about his father. And I asked him that why don't he write sketches, and he said that I have written the sketch of my father in the form of a short story titled Phoolon Wali Pahadi. And then you can find certain parts of his autobiography in dispersed in his fiction writing as well, in his travelogues as well. And undoubtedly he is a very, very good Urdu writer, and I am sorry to say that his works have not been properly translated and conveyed to the whole world. Otherwise, if they had been translated properly in English, though a few of his, there is a very good professor of literature, I think in Islamabad,
who has been translated
by him.
Yes,
yes, it's a good translation, a very good translation. His novel Raak should also be translated, and I would stress that the government should set up a body to translate Urdu works into English. And because when we are working for the soft image of Pakistan, there are two things which excels in bringing the soft image of a country. One is sports and the other is literature.
Okay.
We know Gabriel Garcia Marquez, and we know Pablo Neruda, and many other writers who did not belong to very developed countries, but they became ambassadors, literary ambassadors of their countries.
Well, this is very interesting, but the fact is I don't think literature should be to build some image. It has its own purposes. We had a very good discussion, and I am sure there are some missing personalities as well, like Qasim Bhatt Sahab, who was a great novel writer, novelist of our time. Asif Farhi Sahab, who had introduced this literary festivals in Pakistan. But time is so short, I have been told to close this session. Thank you very much, Irfan, for coming here, giving us time. And because of your books and sketches, we have almost traveled whole 50, 60 years of Pakistan's Urdu literature, its personalities and trends in our literature. Thank you, viewers, for watching our program. See you next Sunday, same time at 7 p.m.